Welcome to Our Village Circle, a podcast centered around authentic sharing, honest storytelling, and elevating the voices of parents and professionals alike to demystify the realities of new parenthood. We understand on a visceral level that with the joy of your new human also comes every other emotion under the sun. We want you to feel seen, heard, known, and held in this life-altering stage. We wholeheartedly believe that everyone's story has something powerful to offer others as they navigate their own journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host, Jaylee Turner, and today I'm so excited to share this episode with you. We're going to be speaking with Sarah Issaelkhoury, a teacher, musician, and mom of triplets from Northern Virginia, who also happens to be one of my closest friends. We met almost 10 years ago working as professional musicians, and we instantly clicked and have stayed close ever since. It's been such a privilege to watch her go through this journey. And today she's going to share it with us. It's an amazing story, and I didn't feel right trying to condense it into one episode, so I've actually split this one into two parts. In today's episode, Sarah will take us through her own journey with unexplained infertility, going through fertility treatments and a subsequent IUI, and her experience carrying and birthing her baby boys. After this week's episode, stay tuned for the second half of the story, which is equally as amazing. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to Our Village Circle. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
First of all, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your family.
Yeah, so I am Sarah. I'm a musician, which is how I know Jaylee, and I'm an elementary school music teacher in Northern Virginia. And the biggie thing about me is that I have 2.5-year-old triplet boys who are currently napping and hopefully are going to stay asleep while we talk.
I'm so excited to sit here and pick your brain about all of that. I was lucky enough to watch the whole thing happen.
You were one of the first people who knew.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't keep it in. It was like it's probably the biggest secret I hope that I will ever have to keep. Which I didn't do a very good job keeping. I told too many people, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I needed support. I needed help.
Of course. Yeah. I cannot even imagine trying to keep a secret. That I had a hard time when I was pregnant with one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was actually thinking about this though, because a friend recently told me that she was pregnant, and I was thinking like our generation is so lucky to have the stigma of keeping an early pregnancy a secret. Like that stigma is gone really in our generation. I feel like it's much more normal to share that joy and the excitement and the nerves and have the honest conversations, because I think we know more now that it's the mental health component of it is so much more important, and that it's more important to share with your friends and share the joy and the love. And then God forbid something happens, you have that support system already in place. But I don't think our mothers or our grandmothers had that luxury.
Because there used to always be this unspoken rule of don't tell anyone until 12 weeks, because if something happens, then you're going to have to go around and tell them that it's not good news anymore. I'm glad that people are in general feeling a lot more open to share about those things. Of course, with thoughtfully selected people. Yeah, for sure. So why don't we go ahead and launch into your story?
Yeah. So I guess we can just do that chronologically. So when my husband and I got married, he is a little bit older than me, and we wanted to start trying right away, immediately, because we knew that we wanted to have kids early in our marriage, and everything with us went fast. Like we met and we moved in together and we got engaged and we got married in a very short span of time. So it fit the bill. And we were just enjoying that, like enjoying the excitement of trying and hoping. And in that same time frame, I started having some health issues where I was in a lot of pain. My joints were hurting. I was putting on weight without really any explanation, like no traditional sort of ways of losing weight were working. And I was just getting really tired all the time. Like I would get home from work and need to sleep for 3 hours, take a 3 hour nap in the middle of the day. And it just didn't make sense. So I went to the doctor and through a lot of testing was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and insulin resistance and was put on a lot of medications and was told that was the reason that I was having trouble getting pregnant. So this physician who I am not a fan of, and I've since met a lot of people who is endocrinologist, and we all have similar stories where he's a fat shamer and a blamer of all ailments on body size and perceived lack of effort, lack of care. And it just became a really negative experience for me. So my whole first year of trying to get pregnant was really wrapped up in this is my fault. This was something I did to myself. And thankfully, I had friends who were going through similar circumstances, coworkers who I've met. And again, we started already with this topic of like communities of women helping each other by just giving each other information. And a friend said, I just don't think that's right. I really think that you need to go and see a reproductive endocrinologist. So I took her advice, and this was at the 2-year mark,
Oh, wow.
which is a really long time to be waiting and trying. And I had a really unpredictable period, and there were just a lot of things happening that I couldn't be explained, except this physician had told me basically it was my fault. So we went to a local reproductive endocrinologist at Shady Grove, which is a big company in the Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area. And we started the testing process. And after our testing came back, it turned out my reproductive endocrinologist said, this isn't your fault. This is just your body. This is just something that happens. It's called unexplained infertility, which is a very frustrating diagnosis to receive because it means nothing. But it was actually really comforting to hear that maybe I hadn't done anything wrong. My husband had low motility sperm, which is another thing that there's not really a defined reason why that happens. And like typical men, all they said was just cut down on the beer and it'll probably be fine. And so that was a really minor blip on the radar. But otherwise, it really just came down to the need to induce a period. So I ended up going on birth control, ironically, even though I had stopped birth control for maybe 2 weeks. And then when I went onto the placebo pills, it triggered the response of my body to start a period. And then we did a round of Clomid. And the first round of Clomid, we went through, and at the day where we could do the transvaginal ultrasound to count the eggs to see how many eggs I had, I didn't have any. And I had started on a pretty low dose. So we canceled that cycle. I went back on birth control. And the next time I had 3 eggs. And my doctor said, and my doctor's a wonderful guy, really wonderful. He said it would be very rare for all 3 of these eggs to be fertilized. I think that we should go ahead and do a trigger shot of Avidrel and do an IUI. So we did the trigger shot. And we went in for the IUI on a Saturday. And I very distinctly remember laying on the table and the doctor, it was a different office because it was a weekend. And the doctor, she said, honey, just so you know, the rates of first IUI success are very low. So you're probably going to be back in here another time or 2 or 3 more times. And don't feel bad about this. This is your first try. She was really trying to comfort me. And I remember thinking, okay, it will be what it will be. And turns out all 3 of those eggs were fertilized the first try, which almost felt like I was getting cheated out of the experience of like, I don't know, after all those years, I was like, this is all it took. Oh, sorry.
Right, especially if everyone's telling you, don't expect it to work. Expect this to be a long process. And had you watched people go through this process prior to going through it on your own?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One of my very best friends, she went through 6 IUIs before one of them worked. And at the same time, I had a friend going through it where she went through 6 IUIs and then 2 rounds of IVF before anything worked. And you see the women in the waiting rooms at the reproductive endocrinologist, and it's torture to walk into a room and see the same face like month after month. and just know that everybody is going through this silent battle, and whether or not it's supposed to be like a humiliating experience, like your body isn't doing the main thing that it was designed to do. And society tells you that it should be pretty easy to get pregnant, especially our generation. How many of us were put on birth control as teenagers just in case? And you live this life of tiptoeing and hoping that it works, the pills work. And then once you actually want to go for it and it doesn't work, it seems like you're cheated. So it was an amazing thing to find out that I was pregnant. We didn't initially find out it was triplets, though. We just knew we were pregnant. They did the blood work. So we had about 3 weeks before we found out that there were 3 babies. And when we went in that day to do the ultrasound, I was a mess because I was just certain that it wouldn't have taken, that this baby, this one baby I thought I had, would be gone. And we were really psyching ourselves out of it to just lessen the blow of what was coming. And I remember when the ultrasound tech looked up at the screen, and it was a really quiet gasp. And I knew immediately what I was looking at because I had been, of course, like on Google and looking at images of every ultrasound ever. And I said, "Is that what I think it is?" And Emil, who's standing behind me, is a veteran, and he's a very stoic, quiet guy. And he said, "What's going on?" And she said, "There are triplets. You're having triplets." And I launched into this profanity laced like rant. I don't even know what I was saying. I was so shocked. I just kept saying, oh my God. And the ultrasound tech looked up at Emil and she said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I've been to Baghdad. I've seen worse."
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, it was shocking news. I hope it was the most shocking good news I'll ever receive in my life. Because
So what was your process of coming to terms with that news?
oh my gosh, like my whole pregnancy was the process of I'm still coming to terms with that news. I'm not there yet. I don't know. It's shocking. I cried a lot. I was supposed to go to training that day for something for my job. And we walked out of the office and I said, and we had just gotten a puppy. We had just gotten a puppy, Pablo. And we were like, "Oh, we'll have one baby." And I remember Pablo was at home. He was like 9 weeks old. And I was like, "I can't go to work and I can't be by myself. I need to go to my mom's house." And Emil said, "Okay, I'll go get Pablo. Are you okay to drive to Ashburn where your mom lives?" I said, "Yes." And I drove there. He went and got the dog. And I walked in and I cried on the couch for the entire day because I was just so shocked. I was so shocked. And we talk about this a lot in our triplet Facebook groups. We talk about how nobody plans to have triplets. People will say in the grocery store, "Oh my gosh, were you planning that?" And I always want to say, "Can you plan that? What are you talking about?"
That's such an odd question.
It is really weird. Yeah. Nobody would ever plan to do that. And we say, "Oh my gosh, twins would be great," or "some multiples would be great." But the reality is, when you're presented with that reality, it doesn't feel in the moment like a gift. To me, it felt like I had to mourn the plans that I had made for myself. And it took a really long time for me to move past that. I remember standing in my kitchen and crying when I was like 12 weeks pregnant, because I had known for a long time by that point, because I was mad at my babies for existing. And then I felt guilty for being mad. And it was a long cycle of wrapping my head around what I had planned for my life to be and then what my life was going to be. And slowly the feeling went away. And now I can be the older triplet mom in the younger triplet mom groups who can say that it will go away. It will get better. You will be joyful. But I think it's more common than uncommon for that shock to be pervasive. And I had great friends like you and my husband and our families who were supportive, never shut me down, never made me feel guilty for feeling that way. I think everybody understood that it was just surprising. And once I got further in my pregnancy and the fears of miscarriage also went away, that made it a little bit easier. So yeah.
Yeah. What did pregnancy look like week to week for you?
Lots of doctor's appointments. when you have higher order multiples, and actually when you have twins, sometimes you have to have it as well, but higher order multiples is usually 3 or more. So triplets, quads, quints, and so on. You have to see a maternal fetal medicine physician in addition to, or in replacement of your typical OB. So when I thought I had one baby, I had already made an appointment for an ultrasound at 12 weeks with an OB. When I found out I had triplets, I called that OB and they refused care. They weren't qualified. So I had to find a physician that would take care of me. So you can either have an OB who will take care of you alongside of an MFM, or you can just go to an MFM who does both, which is what I ended up doing. So we had ultrasounds every other week for the entire pregnancy, which was a lot of coordination to try to take off work and be able to go, because it wasn't also just to check to see if they were there. They were checking 3 babies. So every appointment took 3 times as long.
Wow.
And then I had to meet with the doctor every other week to go over developmental growth, placenta, cervix measurements, and questions that I had. So it was a lot of doctor's appointments. And I recommend to anybody listening out there, it's a good idea for anybody, but especially for multiples, to bring someone with you or to ask your doctor if you can record the conversation, because I feel like there was so much that we forgot to ask and so many things that we forgot that they told us, because you're just getting so much information. I had placenta previa, which means my placenta was attached directly over my cervix. So I was on full pelvic rest for my entire pregnancy.
So for our listeners, that is a really common recommendation for placenta previa. They'll put you on pelvic rest, which means you can't have sex, you can't really put anything in the vagina, no tampons, nothing. And you can't really stand for any sort of extended period of time either. So then in the process of going through all your ultrasounds, was the development pretty consistent, or were there a lot of bumps in the road with developmental things with the boys?
Everything was really great until I was 27 or 28 weeks, which is a huge milestone to make it that far in the first place, because you're pretty much viable. Nearly every NICU in the country is set up to at least try for interventions if a baby is born at that age. So I was really lucky that my babies were completely typical and growing at the expected rates. They were on their own growth curve, and their heartbeats were great the entire time. And actually my body, I felt really good being pregnant until around 27 or 28 weeks, which is also the marker where I was measuring like I was 40 weeks with a single baby, like the size of my belly and my uterus. So I would go to my appointments and I'd be in the waiting room and people would be like, "Oh my God, you're due any minute." And I'd be like, "No, I still have 12 weeks to go." Yeah, I was huge. And then around that time, one of my babies had reverse cord flow, which is just a problem with the blood going through the placenta, from the placenta to the baby through the umbilical cord. And then he was just measuring a little smaller. So he wasn't growing at the same rate. It was my baby C, which was the baby at the very top. And I don't know the statistics. I feel like informally, I noticed that baby tends to be the one with the growth problems because they're so far away, but I don't know that for sure. But yeah, so we were just watching him. So then I had to go every week. And at the next week, my blood pressure was really high. And they were just noticing that there were maybe some signs of preeclampsia starting. So at 28 weeks, I got my first round of steroid shots to help develop the baby's lungs, just in case something happened and they had to do an early delivery. And then the next week, my blood pressure went really high and I started to get dizzy. So at 29 weeks, we went into labor and delivery, which I will say now to anyone who is pregnant, no matter how many babies you have, do not feel guilty for calling your doctor if you ever have a concern. This is something that we talk about all the time in our triplet groups. People will get on Facebook and say, "Hey, my blood pressure is really high. My vision is blurred. My arms are really swollen and I feel nauseous. What do I do?" And it's so funny to see the rolling comments from the moms who've already had their kids who are, "Call your doctor, go to labor and delivery." And I felt like I don't want to waste their time. These are medical physicians. They have precious resources if I go in and it's nothing, that was a huge waste of their time.
I felt that way when I was pregnant. When I started having, in hindsight, very clear symptoms of preeclampsia. I was singing at a job one day and I started having the kaleidoscope vision like you get with a migraine. And then I had a whole bunch of symptoms which were completely suspect, that I felt like I didn't want to bother a doctor. I didn't want to seem like I was overly worried as a first-time mom, but something really was wrong.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And all of the symptoms of preeclampsia are also things that you just associate with being really pregnant
Yeah.
or being close to delivery. So I can imagine, because you were pretty far along and you were 30, 37 or 38 weeks.
I was
And
35 when things started going on.
right. So then you're like, is this just, especially for a first time mom, is this just normal? Is this, how do you know? Labor feels different for everybody.
Yeah, I just
So,
assumed it was being really pregnant.
or having too much salt in your food or something. So yeah, I felt really bad. And when I went in, my blood pressure was a little lower than it had been at home, but they wanted to keep me overnight. And then over the first night, second night, third night, it was just not predictable. Like sometimes they'd come in and it was really high, sometimes low. So they just opted to keep me on hospital bed rest, which I was happy for because I just didn't know. I felt like I maybe could have gone home in hindsight. I probably would have been okay, but just that unknown wasn't worth it to me to risk the lives of my kids. And selfishly, I was like, maybe I'll get more ultrasounds if I stay. Maybe I'll get to see them more because it's terrifying. The other thing with multiples is there's such a high risk of one baby not making it, or just going and you'll have two heartbeats and be missing one, or God forbid one. In our groups, you see all of the different complications that people can have. I was fortunate not to have so many complications, and my baby's hearts were fully developed. I didn't have any pre-existing conditions that would have caused any risk for my kids. But I was also in these groups seeing my friends lose their babies over time. And it's something that I don't think I'm desensitized to, but at least it's more normal for me to have topics of fetal loss. And it was just, I was happy to be in a place where I was being cared for. I was on bed rest until I was 33 weeks and 6 days.
What was the day-to-day like for you being on bed rest in the hospital?
It was awesome because I watched Netflix and slept all the time. And for me, that's my dream, is just to sleep. I couldn't have any coffee either because my blood pressure was so high. So I was like genuinely exhausted. I had friends like you come visit me and bring me yummy food. I made really great friends with a lot of the nurses, like people I still hang out with even today, because they become like your family. I was still working, so I was writing lesson plans for my sub and doing grades and keeping busy, but it was just a lot of rest. That was my whole job at that point, was just keep those babies in. They say that every day that you keep the babies in is 2 to 3 days that you keep them out of the NICU. So I just was trying so hard not to move, laying on my left side, and then eating a lot, because by the end I was eating like 5,000 calories a day and losing weight. The last week I was pregnant, I was eating like an Olympic swimmer. They weighed me every day and I was losing weight. And they were like, you need to eat more. I was like, that is truly impossible. My stomach is squished like a pancake by this massive uterus. I had reflux like you couldn't believe. I was like, I couldn't keep anything down. But I'd call my husband and be like, and he, oh my gosh, my sweet husband, he would come every day after work. Our home and our hospital were an hour apart. So he worked in the middle, and every day he'd go to work and then he would drive 30 minutes past work to the hospital, and he'd hang out with me for 4 or 5 hours. And then he'd drive an hour home. And I'd be like, there's a mall halfway here and I need you to go to Cinnabon and get me 5 Cinnabons. like, I think there's still one Uno's in America and I need a deep dish pizza. And you go find it for me. Oh,
Live it up.
It was, yeah, I lived hard. Yeah. But that's like the only time in my life that I'll be able to do that. So whatever.
Right.
Yeah. But it was just a lot of waiting and hoping. Our plan was just to deliver sometime between 35 and 36 weeks. That was the goal. Because of all my preeclamptic symptoms, they figured it wouldn't be safe to try past that. And that's a really great gestation for triplets.
Mm-hmm.
We had a C-section scheduled. I don't have any like hard stats on this, but I do feel, and I've had this corroborated by moms of years before me, that people are making it farther. The medicine is improving, so people are able to, barring unpredictable complications, carry their triplets much further. I'm seeing people delivering them well into the 36th week.
Wow, and that used to not be common.
No, not my doctor. I don't know exactly how many years they had been in practice, but a long time, like longer than I had been alive. And they said up until 10 years ago, they used to force all of their triplet moms to go on hospital bed rest at 20 weeks, regardless of what they were doing, and just hope for the best. I have a triplet mom friend whose girls just turned 18 yesterday, and she, because of some complications, was on bed rest from 12 weeks. And she made it to 32 weeks, but she spent 20 weeks living in a hospital, just hoping to keep the girls in. But I just saw a girl who delivered her babies last week at 36 weeks vaginally. She pushed out 3 5-pound babies. And it's like, Xena, warrior princess. Damn, that's amazing. It wasn't in the cards for me. So I ended up having a C-section in the middle of the night because my blood pressure skyrocketed to like stroke levels. And for no reason, there was just no predictability. It was just that my body was done. So yeah, I had my boys, and actually it was the doctor who ended up delivering. I had never even met. He was the only doctor in the practice that had just not been on the rotation of appointments that I had. But he was,
you got to meet him.
Yeah, I got to meet him, and it was his birthday, and he was on call. And yeah, his name was Dr. Gomez, such a nice guy. And the resident, whose name I can't remember, it was her birthday. My boys were born at 2 a.m. Dr. Gomez's birthday was the day before, and her birthday was the day we delivered. So we were joking that it was a birthday party, and they were singing happy birthday to the boys as they were born. I was totally fine having a C-section because I had never known any other option for myself. Right. So I don't regret that at all. I never really had an opinion on how my babies should be born. I just wanted them to be healthy. So I wasn't nervous. I had no reservations about it. It was a really positive experience, just the birth in general, and just the sound of hearing Fluke was born first and just hearing his cry. And after just what had felt like a marathon for about 7 months that I was able to be pregnant, it was just amazing oh my God, I really did it. They're here. And I guess everybody feels that way. I don't know, but it was a miracle. So they were healthy when they were born. And my little guy, Toby, who was my baby C with the growth restriction, he was a little bit smaller than we had predicted, but he was completely healthy, just little. And we both know now that didn't stop him because he's crazy now. He doesn't stop. Yeah. So then when they were born, I guess I'm just like giving you all the details of the story.
I think sometimes people know for whatever reason that they are going to have a planned cesarean, or things change in the middle of labor and it goes on to be a cesarean, but no one talks to them about what that process is going to look like.
And that was something that was discussed in mine, because they said, even if we were to try a vaginal delivery, and I'm using vaginal, and I'm trying to carefully use that word and not use natural, because that's a word that gets put around a lot, like a natural delivery or a C-section. And it's just a bad taste in my mouth. Like nothing was unnatural about what happened. And that goes for the infertility stuff too. We were talking yesterday about this, about how people will meet me and find out I have triplets. And one of the first things they say is, oh, were they natural or were they IVF? And there's a whole like backstory of people's limited understanding of what infertility treatments can mean and what an IUI is versus IVF and the process of getting there. And my babies were born because of an IUI, but that doesn't make them unnatural to me. I conceived them, I carried them, and I gave birth to them with the help of some amazing physicians. Imagine you're on an operating table. There was an isolette for each of the babies. The isolate had one neonatologist and 2 nurses per baby. So there's 3 doctors and 6 nurses just for the kids. I had a physician and a resident, and then there was a student in the room. And then I had a team of probably 10 nurses and 2 anesthesiologists for me. And then my husband and I. That's a lot of people in one room, just like milling about. And that's what it took to get us here. It's what it took to keep us safe. I was cool with it. I was like, hey guys, we're going to have a party in here. And for them, it's like run of the mill. Yeah, triplets. We do this all the time. But for me, it was like, what? Like, this is happening. But when I say I didn't want to have a vaginal birth, if for anybody who's pregnant, especially with multiples, delivering the baby is the goal. How you get there, of course, you can have preferences. It would be beautiful to have. I always wanted to have one baby. I wanted a water birth. I wanted like the Roman candles and the mood music and stuff. That was me. I was like, I'm going to be totally hippie about this. And it just, you can't make plans for something like this because the babies are the ones who are in control.
No, birth is unpredictable, even with one.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, thinking back is just wild to relive that whole experience. And like my husband, didn't matter how much preparation we did. I don't think that they say like a mom becomes a mom when she gets pregnant and the dad becomes a dad when he holds his baby. There's that phrase, but we really had to go through a lot to get to the point of having our kids. And I remember him just being so calm and so precious and loving and like sweet and like just my husband. He's not an exuberant guy. Like he keeps everything very steady. Yeah. And it was helpful to have him there to just steady me in that experience. And yeah, so they were born and then they had to go to the NICU, which is very common for any baby born before 36 weeks. So he whisked away with them to get them settled in the NICU. And I was in recovery and I had a pretty rough time in recovery. I did hemorrhage a little bit. I had to have 1 blood transfusion, which was something that they just do, but I was alone. And during that time, I didn't have any of my people with me. And I was given Percocet as part of the recovery from the C-section, and I had an allergic reaction. And I didn't know because I was just out of it from the medications and the adrenaline. So recovery was not easy. And I was put back in a room on the labor and delivery floor to recover from my surgery, while my husband was upstairs with the babies in the NICU, getting them set up. And that started the hardest part for me of the postpartum time, because I was left alone in a room for 36 hours. And it wasn't like I was abandoned. Every once in a while, a nurse would come in to check my vitals. And at one point, the physician who had been scheduled to do my C-section came in to check on me. And my husband was in and out because he needed to go home and shower and get some rest. So I was in this room because I had preeclampsia and they had me on a magnesium drip before I went in for my C-section, which just helps keep your blood pressure down and prevents you from having a stroke in delivery.
And how did you feel on the magnesium? Did you have any side effects from that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You end up feeling drunk without the happiness, like drunk without the carefreeness. It's just you feel sluggish and completely unable to focus. You get really hot and sweaty, and you can feel really nauseous too. So it is very uncomfortable. All the pictures of me are my face is like tomato red. And the mag drip is a 24-hour thing. So I think I started it at, I don't know, midnight. And I was supposed to be on it until midnight the next day. And they ended up keeping me on it because of my blood pressure for 26 hours. So around 2 a.m, 24 hours after my kids had been born. But if you think about it, they were born in the middle of the night. I was whisked into recovery. Then I was brought down to my room, which was a room that was like empty. It was a huge room and I was by myself. And then everyone was gone. And there was no phone. I wasn't allowed to have anything to eat. I wasn't allowed to have anything to drink because of the magnesium. I was just stuck there. I didn't have my cell phone. I didn't have any of my stuff, which my husband was busy. We had 3 kids suddenly, he had stuff to do. I had a really traumatic, and it's taken me a while to call it traumatic because I just thought it was normal experience.
Yeah, I feel like the word trauma, the first thing that comes to mind is like a soldier in battle or something where it was just like the conventional definition of trauma. But the truth is, birth trauma is real. So if it was traumatic to you, then it was a traumatic experience.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I'm the personality type where I just try to be good at everything and try to power through things, and a little perfectionism and a little, I can handle anything. It ended up taking me over 2 years to process through that experience.
So you guys went from being a family of two to a family, or three if you include Pablo, to a
Right.
family
To a
of
family.
five.
Yeah.
Six.
And 6 if you include Pablo, right?
And six if you include Pablo.
I know, which I do, because he's like the quadruplet, because he's the same age as the boy. So it's just, yeah. And I remember texting, I eventually got my phone and I remember texting my family and just letting them know the boys were there. And then I was like, I'm so sad. I'm stuck in this room by myself. I can't wait to see them. I don't know when I'm going to get to see them. They were like, call your doctor. But I couldn't remember anyone's numbers because I was medicated and having an allergic reaction to Percocet. So I was all hulked up. My arms were the color of tomatoes and they were swollen. That was how I got my reaction. And then this nurse comes in and they're like, here's a pump, get started. I'm like, what is a pump? There is no time to learn what a pump is until you have to pump. You cannot learn how to do that until you're doing it, because they say don't pump before you have your baby because it can cause labor to start. It can cause contractions, the hormone changes. So it's not like you can practice. So I'm like, what setting do I put it on? How long do I do this for? And I was just so confused, and I was trying to pump and get colostrum, and it was so painful and I couldn't stay awake. And so the first time I ever pumped, I got the bra on and I got everything going, and I set a timer on my phone for 25 minutes or something. And I slept through it and I woke up and it had been going on for almost 50 minutes and my boobs were like raw. It was so painful, but I was that tired. And then what I was having to do was take this colostrum into a teeny syringe, like the kind you get for like infant gas drops. And I was putting it with a like plastic spoon basically into a syringe, and then having to call the nurses, and they were taking it and going upstairs and bringing it to the NICU. And then the NICU nurses were feeding the boys before I had never met them. Wow. It was just the whole experience. I could go on, but it was just not ideal. What I needed in that moment was somebody at my side to explain what was happening. And that person couldn't be my husband because he had to deal with all of the NICU paperwork, and he had to deal with getting home and getting to take a shower and care for himself because we had been up all night. And I needed like a doula. I needed somebody who could, and I didn't know about that because I always knew I was going to have a C-section. I always knew I was going to have the medical version of birth. And I don't know that I even knew that a doula was somebody who could be an advocate for a patient who had a C-section.
Yeah, that's a really common misconception about doulas as well. I think, again, throwing around that natural word, I think that word can often be associated with doulas.
For me, definitely. Until recently it was.
Yeah, even at the beginning of my pregnancy, that's what I thought a doula was too. It was someone who could help me have a natural birth. It wasn't until I started getting further along in my pregnancy and taking the childbirth education classes and then doing my own doula training that I really truly began to understand what a doula is. And really at the heart of what a doula does is emotional support.
Yeah.
Pregnancy, the birth is such a small portion of what doulas do. It's really that prenatal support, the birth preparation for however it's going to go, and then helping the newly postpartum parent process what has just happened.
That's what it felt like. What just happened? Like, where am I? What room am I in? What floor in this hospital am I on? There were no windows in my room. Like, where am I? And I'm by myself, and I had no clue what I was doing. And on a personal note, my mom, who has chronic illness was in the ICU at the same hospital where I was having my boys. And so my dad was like in and out of this hospital, but he couldn't come to labor and delivery. He wasn't allowed because I was considered a critical patient at the time because of my blood pressure level. So he couldn't even come and see me. It was just, I wish I had known more before I went into it. I wish I had known what was going to happen. No one could predict like how my delivery was going to happen. No one knew that I was going to go into preeclamptic nightmare blood pressure territory in the middle of the night and have to have an emergency C-section. So I don't blame anyone. I don't blame myself, but I wish that I had known how to advocate for myself and how to plan to have somebody I could call and say, I need you to come and like sit with me to get me through the next 24 hours, because it was just really rough. It was not a positive way to start. And I felt so guilty because I was just sitting there picturing my babies who had been in me for that whole time, alone in an isolette in a room where I didn't know what the rooms looked like, and feeling like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. If I had one baby, they would have put them on my chest and I would never have let go. And we would be in this 24 hours of bliss of, like warm colors and pink and happiness and la la la. And I just felt like I was failing my kids in that moment. I know now that's not true. I know now that they were very cute blobs who were just doing their thing in their isolates. They were completely fine, but it just was not a great way to start. So I ended up, this is at like the 29-hour mark of being stuck in this room where I really felt like I was awake for the first time. I remembered the number, the hospital extension number for my resident who had been watching me when I was on bed rest. And I wish I knew her full name. We called her Buki because she had a really long name and that was her nickname. I hope I'm even remembering the nickname. But I remember like remembering the 5 digits that had been on my whiteboard, and I called her and I was like sobbing into the phone. Like, I need to see my kids. They are in their 2nd day of life and I have not seen them. This is not okay. And she was like, yeah. And she jumped in an elevator and got down to labor and delivery and walked right past the nurses and with a wheelchair, got me out of bed because I hadn't been out of bed at all. I hadn't eaten. This is 2 days after I had my kids in the 2nd day, and I hadn't eaten food. I was starving. I was like so thirsty. And she just got me out of bed. She's like, and they were like, she is her blood pressure. And she was like, it is important for her to go and see her kids. We are going to take her back to the bed rest floor and we will monitor her blood pressure. And that was a hospital misstep. They should have had more communication and they didn't.
Yeah.
But I ended up being wheeled up into the NICU, and I have a video of when I got to hold Toby for the first time because his room was just the first room off the elevator. And in the video, I'm crying and I just keep saying, it's so nice to meet you. It's so nice to meet you, which is what a weird thing to say to your kid on the second day.
Them for the first time.
Yeah, it felt like formal. I feel like this kid's had experience. I don't know everything about this kid. Like, he's had other people holding him and like cuddling him. And I can look back on that now and be grateful for the care in the NICU, which was extraordinary.
That's all for this week, but if you want to keep listening to Sarah's story, be sure to join us for next episode, where we'll continue this discussion. Sarah will take us through the initial months of her early parenthood experience, navigating postpartum anxiety with 3 newborns, how she found her own voice as a parent, and how she found her village for raising multiples. You can find Sarah on Instagram at Sarah_has_triplets. If you like what you're hearing, please feel free to follow, like, and share this podcast with anyone that you feel may need it. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Our Village Circle, and our website is www.ourvillagecircle.com. Until next time, bye-bye.